coming. I'm Manish Melwani, and I'm here to talk about the hero, mythic narrative, and storytelling. So let's start at the beginning. As most stories start, the beginning is a good place to start. And the beginning was the word. The word in this case is mythos, which is Greek for story. This can refer to any type of story. Urban legends, creation tales, local sagas, even you telling your roommate about last night's drunken escapades. That's a story too. But all stories would be really boring without a hero. Without a protagonist, nothing gets done. And so we have the hero, which comes from the Greek word heros, which used to mean demigod, and now it has the associations that we have for it today. So let's look at some famous heroes from classical tradition. Gilgamesh, Achilles, and of course, famous hero of antiquity, Superman. We also shouldn't forget the heroes of fairy tales and folklore, because this represents a really important means by which information is transmitted from generation to generation. In the days before internet, before television, and before books, knowledge was passed down through the telling of tales. Like Lisa said in her talk, storytelling is about the sharing of experience. The storyteller would tell his listeners things that they would need to know to navigate the world around them. For example, there's a famous story in this little village somewhere in southern Europe about a hill that is near the village. This hill has plenty of food and lots of good fruits to eat, but no one ever goes there because of the story surrounding it. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, Jack and Jill went up the hill, and then they got eaten by a bear. So the moral of the story is you don't go up the hill. Now, stories answer little details like this, but they also answer the big burning questions, such as why? Why are we all here? What is the universe? And in response to that last question, you could get a ton of different answers depending on who you asked and where and when you were living. Norse mythology says that the universe is the body of the dead frost giant Ymir after he was killed by Odin and his brothers. Another myth you may be more familiar with is I love this, the Judeo-Christian one, in which the beginning was the word, and here we are today. I think that there's something really poetic about this myth, the idea that God started telling a story and this sort of spun the universe into being. It's like the idea that the universe is sung into being, that the universe is a giant symphony. Since technology influences culture, I wouldn't be surprised in like 20, 30 years, we actually believe that God is a DJ. I'm totally down with that idea. But anyway, I'm digressing a little bit. Back to the cosmic question, why? We know a lot of science now. We know about quarks, we know about string theory, we understand the mechanics of the universe, but we don't really know the answer to the meaning of life. I mean, maybe some of you do, but I certainly don't. I think that these stories, these myths, have given us the answer from the very beginning. They've always been there. We just didn't know about it. Joseph Campbell, in his famous book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, posits the idea of the hero's journey, this cosmic circle. And this cycle is repeated all over human culture. In thousands of different stories, thousands of different heroes, they all go through different variations of the same journey. Now, we tend to get really caught up on the trappings of the extraordinary death of the hilltop, the sacred marriage, brother battle, dragon battle. I mean, these things are all really cool. They sound exciting, like special effects, but they distract us from the ultimate underlying truth, which is that these stories are about individuation. What Carl Jung called the process by which individual beings are formed and differentiated from other humans. In particular, the development of the psychological individual as being distinct from the general collective psychology. What Jung is talking about here is that these stories are a process by which we learn to be ourselves, by which we learn to be human. So, if you look at all the myths from all over the world, there's a ton of different things that happen, and some of them, heroes escape from the underworld, blowing up the Death Star along the way. Sometimes the hero is part God, part man, come down from on high. Sometimes he's just a man who has experienced some kind of cosmic revelation and feels compelled to share it. Other heroes die and are reborn. ultimately, this hero, this figure, he's a link between us and the divine. He's literally a bridge between mankind and the gods. What are we to make of this? What are we as modern, rational human beings, or irrational, sorry, to make of stories in which characters routinely interact with such crazy beings? Well, I think Alan Moore put it really well when he said, the one place that gods inarguably exist is in our minds, where they are real beyond refute in all their grandeur and monstrosity. So all the stories about heroes and gods are really stories about us. Like Emma was saying, all the stories about monsters, they're stories about us too. So looking through this human lens, what can we learn from these tales? Back to Jesus. Really inspirational story, I think. Here's a guy who's being tortured to death. And his last thought is not to condemn his captors, rather it's to wish them well and to beg for their forgiveness. The idea that against the most oppressive hate, the most powerful weapon is love. More recent example, 8-year-old Bruce Wayne sees his parents killed in front of him. Possibly the worst thing that any 8-year-old could ever have to go through. Instead of becoming a murderous psychopath, he spends years channeling his rage through mental and physical conditioning to become Batman. Sorry, I kind of had to do that. Then there's stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh and Beowulf, in which the hero comes face to face with his own mortality. In Beowulf, this great king of the Danes, the most badass warrior of them all, he dies too. And it's very important for the listener to reconcile himself with the fact of death. I think that we as modern humans have a lot of trouble reconciling ourselves with this fact. And yet, it's inevitable. We're all going to die. I'm going to die. You're going to die. But it's okay. We can get on with our lives while we're here. So, for those of you who don't know the story of Gilgamesh, the one on the left is Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, which is in present-day Iraq. And the guy on the right is his friend, Enkidu. His friend has been killed after a series of adventures they've gone on together, and this grief spurs Gilgamesh to the ends of the world to find the gods and to sort of try and conquer death, to seek immortality. Of course, he doesn't get that. Ultimately, I've talked to you today about the many ways in which we can interpret myths, the various methods of analysis. But I believe that a story is always its own best interpretation. In that spirit, I'd like to close out this evening by reading to you from the Epic of Gilgamesh as translated by David Ferrie. The old man spoke and said to Gilgamesh, "Your face is bitten by hunger or by sorrow. Why do you look like one who has undergone a terrible journey? Why do you look like one who grieves?" Gilgamesh spoke to the old man and said, "I look like one whose grief lives in his heart, because of the death of Enkidu, my companion. Together we made the journey across the mountains and fought the bull of heaven and killed him. Enkidu, the companion whom I loved, who went with me together on the journey no one has ever undergone before. Now, Enkidu has undergone the fate that the high gods have established for mankind. I saw the worm drop out of his nose. Must I die too? Must I too be like that?" The old man spoke and said to Gilgamesh, "You who were born the son of a goddess mother, why do you grieve because of a mortal father? How long does a building stand before it falls? How long does a contract last? How long will brothers share the inheritance before they quarrel? And how long does hatred, for that matter, last? Time after time, the river rises and floods. The insect leaves the cocoon to live but for a moment. How long is the eye able to look at the sun? From the very beginning, nothing at all has lasted. See how the dead and the sleeping resemble each other. Seen together, they are the image of death. The simple man and the ruler resemble each other. The face of the one will darken like the face of the other. When the high gods gathered in assembly, Mametum, the mother goddess, was with them. There they established that there is life and that there is death, and that the day of death is set, but it is never made known." Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.